Well, look who crawled out of the ashes they left you in. The ghost they buried, breathing again. The obituary they wrote, now laughing back. You were dead to them, remember? A fading name in a quiet room. They said you were finished, forgotten, replaced. But corpses don't bleed purpose. And yet, here you are. They held a funeral for your silence. They buried your kindness, your hope, your trust, and called it moving on. But what they didn't know is that the soil doesn't just hide the dead. Sometimes it hides evolution. You didn't rest, you rebuilt. While they toasted to your absence, you sharpened your ruins into weapons. Every insult became iron, every betrayal, another layer of armor. You see, resurrection isn't holy, it's hostile. You didn't come back to be seen. You came back to be remembered, not as who you were, but as what you've become. The walking contradiction of everything they swore you'd never be. You haunt their peace now, don't you? Every success of yours feels like a mirror breaking in their hands. They don't say your name anymore, because even the sound of it feels like guilt. You were never gone. You were just preparing the kind of return that makes history stutter. So here's the irony. They buried you to silence the noise, and yet your echo became the thunder. They burned your name to erase it, and yet your ashes spelled their lesson. Welcome back, darling. You weren't resurrected by mercy. You were resurrected by rage, and rage doesn't ask for permission. You became a ghost while still breathing, unseen, unheard, unwanted. They didn't kill you. They simply stopped acknowledging your existence. And that, my dear, was far more surgical. They called it forgetting. You called it surveillance. Because while they thought you were fading, you were documenting. Every whisper, every eye roll, every quiet betrayal carved into your mind like evidence in a trial no one saw coming. You learned to sit in silence, but you were never still. Your calm wasn't surrender, it was recording. Your absence wasn't weakness, it was witness. Every minute they spent mocking you behind closed doors, you wrote it down in invisible ink, and that ink now bleeds under their names. You stopped defending yourself because the courtroom was corrupt. You stopped speaking because your words were always used as weapons against you. So you built your defense in secret, brick by brick, scar by scar. They thought they were ignoring you, but you were studying them, their patterns, their hypocrisies, their greed for validation. And when you learned how predictable they were, you smiled, quietly, beautifully, dangerously. That's the thing about ghosts. They don't make noise, they make records. And one day, those records become evidence. Evidence that silence isn't empty, it's loaded. You became the quiet they now fear. Because your stillness holds receipts, your silence holds judgment. And when the verdict comes, it won't need to be shouted. It'll arrive in the form of your success, signed, sealed, and stamped by the very people who swore you were gone. They never realized your silence wasn't an ending. It was an autopsy, and the cause of death was their loyalty. You didn't crawl back. You constructed your return. From the rubble of your humiliation, you drew plans in the dust. While they danced on your grave, you were drafting your empire beneath it. Pain became your pencil, betrayal, your ruler, and patience, your ink. Every tremor of agony carved another line on your blueprint. Every scar became an instruction manual for survival. You learned structure through suffering. You learned foundation through loss. And as the world mistook your silence for surrender, you were laying bricks made of vengeance and precision. You weren't rebuilding what was broken. You were redesigning the entire system that allowed the breaking to exist. You studied patterns, how people collapse, how loyalty leaks, how power hides behind pity. And then you adjusted the angles, calculated the cracks, fortified the walls. They called it obsession. You called it architecture, because to them, you were gone. But to you were only under renovation. That's the difference between you and them. They heal to forget. You rebuild to remember. Every betrayal, every dismissal, every smirk, they're all part of the framework now. And it's beautiful, cold, ruthless, unapologetically efficient. You turned your coffin into a drafting table, your ashes into ink, your heartbeat into a hammer. And from that hollow, echoing darkness, you built a structure that no storm could dismantle. They buried a corpse. What they didn't realize was that the dirt they threw on you was only cement. You didn't rise from the grave. You rose with it. And now, every crack in these walls still whispers your name. You can always tell when guilt walks into a room. It smells like wilted flowers and forced smiles. They thought they were safe. They thought the ghost was gone. They spoke your name in past tense, polished their fake sympathy, and gave speeches drenched in hypocrisy. But mid-eulogy, the coffin moved, and every throat went silent. The moment they saw you again, walking, breathing, thriving, their faces collapsed into a single question. How? Because you weren't supposed to rise. You weren't supposed to smile. You weren't supposed to make it past the dirt they buried you under. Your ruin was supposed to be the final chapter. Instead, it became your prologue. Now, every laugh of yours sounds like thunder in their bones. Every breath you take rewrites their script. And every success of yours, it's another nail in their coffin. Funny, isn't it? They rehearsed your tragedy like actors in cheap suits. But now the curtain's turned on them. They're trapped in the very scene they wrote, and you're standing center stage. You don't even need revenge anymore. Your survival is the sermon. Your existence, the verdict. They called it closure. You turned it into chaos. They came to bury peace. You gave them nightmares instead. And as they whisper behind trembling smiles, you simply walk past, calm, amused, untouchable. Because deep down, they all know. The only funeral worth attending is the one where the dead show up late and start laughing. Power doesn't scream anymore. It breathes. Slow, steady, certain. You don't explain. You don't defend. You exist. And that alone unsettles them. Every step you take now is evidence, an affidavit of survival written in motion. Every breath, an exhibit. Every calm glance, cross-examination. And the verdict? Unanimous. You won. They still chase applause. You walk in silence. They still beg for witnesses. You became your own testimony. Because true power isn't loud. It's lawful. It arrives dressed in restraint, wrapped in control, and signed by scars that no longer bleed. You turn their cruelty into craftsmanship, their betrayal into blueprint, and now you wear what once broke you, like jewelry. Chains forged into crowns, mirrors cracking under the weight of who you've become. You don't raise your voice anymore. You raise the temperature of the room just by being in it. It's almost poetic. How the storm that once tore you apart now takes orders from you. How the chaos that used to drown you now kneels quietly at your feet. You've mastered the art of quiet dominance, the kind that doesn't need an audience to feel eternal, the kind that makes enemies whisper your name like a confession, and while they crawl, scraping for validation, gasping for relevance, you keep walking, head unbowed, eyes forward, because revenge isn't always an explosion. Sometimes it's the calm march of a survivor who no longer needs to look back. You don't chase closure anymore. You embody it. And that is how silence learned to wear a crown. You didn't return for applause. You didn't rise for revenge. You rose because silence demanded a monument, and you became it. You're not chasing the living anymore. You're haunting their history. Every room you once left empty now echoes with your name. Every story they tell feels incomplete without the ghost they tried to erase. You became the reminder they can't delete. The proof that destruction, when patient, becomes architecture. Your existence itself is the verdict, that nothing truly dies when purpose still breathes inside the ruins. You see, legacy isn't loud. It lingers. It stains the walls of memory. It forces even your enemies to whisper, "He never really left, did he?" You turned your scars into scripture, your pain into prophecy. And now, generations will study the way you walked through fire without screaming for help. They'll call it mystery. They'll call it madness. But you'll know it was math, calculated, inevitable. Every betrayal, every silence, every scar, it all aligned perfectly to build this ghost of power you've become. You were never meant to be applauded. You were meant to be remembered. And the beauty of it all is that remembrance doesn't require your presence. You are gone, but you're everywhere. Because ghosts don't fade, they franchise. And your legacy will keep haunting the living long after the living forget to breathe.